We are headed to beautiful Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm told a cold front will come through between now and kickoff that will make it feel very seasonal, if not a tinge on the cool, crisp side in Knoxville this Saturday. Legendary rivalry, kids. I'm going to just talk to our high school and college audience for just a second. Legendary. I'm not misspeaking when I talk about that Gator logo and that big T logo and talk about legendary. You just need to crack open a history book. It has been a little while since this one resonated and reverberated outside of the Southeastern Conference. But it matters, and I think that we may have an atmosphere this Saturday in Neyland Stadium that harkens back to some of those more legendary matchups between these two brands. Now, we need to talk about something. It's called a point spread, and Tennessee is favored by 10.5 as we speak here on this Tuesday night. Those of you who have not watched either of these teams this year, but you just have access to trends, may listen to me say Florida has won 16 of the past 17 in this matchup, and then find out Florida's a 10.5-point dog and blindly bet the dog. Now listen, I'm not saying that may not be there's like a triple negative in this sentence, but I'm going to continue. I'm not saying that may not be a profitable strategy generically. I do think this game requires a little bit deeper dive, so let's do it here. This is going to be a theme throughout the night. What are you capable of that you have not shown me yet? It's week 4. It's not November. It's not week 11. By week 11, we know everything pretty much about every team. That doesn't mean upsets don't happen, but rarely does a team show you the capability to do something for the first time in November. Teams show you the capability of doing something for the first time in week 4 every year. It will happen multiple times this weekend. So with the Florida Gators, the 10.5-point dog here, Florida has 10 plays so far this year of 20 yards or more. That is tied for last in the SEC in that category. Anthony Richardson, 0 pass touchdowns, 4+ interceptions, and that makes him one of only 4 quarterbacks in America with that regrettable stat line through the air. My point is that him, or is he capable of more? And it's just something that we haven't seen him deliver on yet. Now, I have mixed feelings about that. There are rumors that have floated around that program that he may be a little bit more banged up than they're leading on to believe, because no one's leading you on to believe that he's hurt at all if you listen to the official talking points from Florida. It would explain some of the ways they've handled him. Also, they have no depth behind him, so that would also explain why they have maybe hesitated to use his legs as the weapon that they can be. Regardless, you need more on the board this Saturday if you want to give yourselves a fighting chance here. How close is this in the fourth quarter? Is this a fourth quarter game? Is it the kind of game where all of a sudden you're texting your buddies, hey, it's not a blowout after all? Well, the way that happens is a couple of things have to go down. I'm kind of trying to look at this from the angle of how could that upset happen, because I think we're in that territory in the way that we typically break games down. Florida's defense has to be able to force a couple of dry spells, a couple of those prolonged 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, those type of dry spells. They can't let Tennessee just consecutively be going up and down the field and scoring because they can't keep up. That could depend on sort of how Tennessee starts, but it's not always like that. So I don't just want to put an emphasis on the first 10 minutes of the game. But when they played Utah, when Florida played Utah, when Florida played Kentucky, when Florida played USF last week, they could depend on some of those dry spells. They knew those teams, and we found out those teams weren't going to get into the 30s and 40s against them. They were going to be hard-pressed to. Tennessee can do that. Tennessee could be, at halftime, what those teams were in totality against you if you don't force some of those dry spells. You're probably absent Ventrell Miller, who's your most important defensive player in this game. That's the word out of Gainesville, at least. So early stops, critical, force mistakes, which Tennessee's been prone to. All you got to do is go back and watch the Pitt game. They gave every reason to believe they were ready to give that game away, and then they happened to win it. But if you could force critical mistakes, like Pitt forced them to do, then, yeah, you got a chance. Early stops, like I said, and then just grind on them with your run game. It's no guarantee it's going to work, but that's the formula if it does work. So if you can get this game to be played in the 20s, if you can get Tennessee pacing towards that, it is your game at that point to win. You still got to grab it, but you have sort of decided the terms. If Tennessee's at 20 or 24 at the half, they're going to run away from you in all likelihood. Tennessee, I think, if you're looking at a game to compare this one to, should go back to last year. Ironically, it's a game we were at, and it's Ohio State versus Michigan State. Now, let me stop. I'm not comparing the Florida team apples to apples to the Michigan State team last year, nor am I comparing Tennessee to Ohio State. What I'm saying is the game could end up starting a lot like that Ohio State-Michigan State game did last year. We were there, total mismatch, total body bag special from the outset. And Ohio State, they didn't feel anything out. They knew they had a mismatch, they exploited it, and they completely sliced Michigan State. Now, Florida's got an infinitely better secondary than Michigan State ever thought about having last year, or apparently is going to think about having this year, judging by last week. So I'm not saying that it's Tennessee 28-0 right out the gate, but I am saying there are some pretty glaring mismatches positionally here that Tennessee, if they so choose to, could aggressively go after and never even allow you time to breathe. I'm very interested to see whether they do that, because you could also sit here in the other chair if we had one on set, and you can make the argument, but Josh, don't you remember the Pitt game? Don't you remember the way Pitt stayed in that game was Tennessee mistakes? Doesn't Tennessee have a good enough ground game? Can't they tempo their way to making Florida wilt on the ground to where they don't just have to throw the ball 40 or 45 times? Yeah, I'm not suggesting they need to throw it 45 times like Ohio State did against Michigan State early on. I'm saying utilizing that tempo, utilizing the ground game, and taking advantage of Florida's lack of depth and lack of players like Ventrell Miller. That's all part of what I'm talking about. I'm just saying I hope from Tennessee's perspective, if I'm backing them, they don't feel their way out in this game. They know who they are. They know where the mismatches are. I think they'll act every bit like Ohio State did against Michigan State last year. Let's take a look at what the Vegas number is. Let's take a look at what our model thinks on this thing. The Vegas number, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, is Tennessee minus 10.5. We're still north of that. We don't think the number's big enough. The model has Tennessee minus 2 touchdowns. Just think it's a mismatch. And this is exclamated by the lack of a guy like Ventrell Miller. For the record, we have baked that into that number. So that's part of Tennessee being minus 14. And also, I have very little confidence that what we have not gotten from Anthony Richardson at home is all of a sudden magically going to show up on the road. So I can't depend on that Florida offense, and because I can't, I've got to factor in the possibility that this thing gets out of whack. Certainly could paint you a picture where it's a one-possession game in the fourth quarter and Florida's got a shot to win it. There's just more on the other side. There are several more scenarios where it's not. So I'm taking Tennessee to win, even at that lofty a number. I'm taking Tennessee to cover. That's a game that we'll be at Saturday. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.